consistent bedtime. Your body runs on a master clock called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, a tiny cluster of neurons in your hypothalamus that coordinates nearly every biological process you have. This clock does not just track when you sleep. It governs hormone release, body temperature, gene expression, and metabolic function across a precise 24-hour cycle. When you go to bed at the same time every night, you synchronize all of those systems. When your bedtime varies randomly, you create a state called social jet lag that disrupts them all. Research from Harvard and Brigham and Women's Hospital found that irregular sleepers had significantly higher rates of metabolic syndrome, obesity, hypertension, and elevated blood sugar compared to people sleeping the same total hours, but on a consistent schedule. The total duration was the same. The regularity was the variable. Your body cannot optimize its repair processes if it does not know when those processes are supposed to begin. Melatonin release, growth hormone secretion, and cortisol tapering all depend on a predictable schedule. The practical target is a 30-minute window. Pick a bedtime that allows for 7 to 8 hours of sleep and stick to it within 30 minutes, including weekends. Yes, weekends. Sleeping in on Saturday and Sunday shifts your circadian phase by the equivalent of flying across time zones every single week. Monday morning grogginess is not a personality trait. It is self-imposed jet lag from a 2-day schedule deviation. If you think this sounds rigid, consider that it is actually liberating. When your circadian rhythm is locked in, you start waking up naturally before your alarm. Your energy becomes predictable throughout the day. Your sleep quality improves because your brain begins the wind-down process automatically at the right time. You are not fighting biology anymore. You are working with it. Set the time, protect the time, and let your clock do the rest. Tongue scraping. Most people think brushing their teeth is enough to handle what is happening inside their mouth. It is not even close. While you sleep, bacteria build a biofilm on the surface of your tongue. That coating is not just morning breath. It is a living colony of microbes producing volatile sulfur compounds and inflammatory byproducts that you swallow with your first sip of water. Brushing your teeth does almost nothing to remove it because bristles cannot reach the textured crevices of your tongue. A stainless steel tongue scraper changes this in about 10 seconds. You place it at the back of your tongue and drag forward with gentle pressure, 5 to 7 strokes, rinsing between each one. What comes off is genuinely unsettling the first time you see it. That gunk was sitting in your mouth all night, and without scraping, it gets reintroduced into your digestive system every single morning. Studies in the Journal of Periodontology show that tongue scraping reduces volatile sulfur compounds by up to 75%, far outperforming brushing the tongue alone. But this is not just about fresher breath. Your oral microbiome is a gateway to systemic health. The bacteria on your tongue can enter your bloodstream through inflamed gums and have been linked to cardiovascular issues and elevated inflammatory markers. By physically removing that bacterial load each morning before eating or drinking anything, you are reducing the upstream source of a surprisingly large amount of low-grade inflammation. The tool costs about $4 and lasts years. The habit takes less time than tying your shoes. Yet almost nobody in the Western world does it, despite the fact that Ayurvedic medicine has recommended it for thousands of years. If you are looking for the single highest return on investment morning habit that requires virtually zero effort, this is it. Scrape before you brush, every single day. Diluted apple cider vinegar before carbs. Here is a trick that costs pennies and can meaningfully flatten your blood sugar curve. About 15 minutes before a carb-heavy meal, Drink a tablespoon of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar, diluted in a full glass of water. The acetic acid in the vinegar slows gastric emptying, which means the carbohydrates you eat hit your bloodstream more gradually, instead of spiking all at once. A study from Arizona State University found this simple practice reduced postprandial glucose by roughly 20 to 30% in insulin-resistant subjects. The mechanism is surprisingly elegant. Acetic acid temporarily inhibits the enzymes that break down starches in your small intestine. It also improves insulin sensitivity at the muscle cell level, helping your body clear glucose from the blood more efficiently. You are not blocking absorption. You are just changing the speed of the process, turning a sharp spike into a gentle rolling hill. That matters because repeated glucose spikes drive glycation, oxidative stress, and eventually insulin resistance over years. Now, there are rules. Never drink it straight. The acid will destroy your tooth enamel and burn your esophagus over time. Always dilute it fully and use a straw if you want extra protection for your teeth. Raw unfiltered is the key here because it contains the mother culture, a colony of beneficial bacteria and enzymes that pasteurized versions lack. And do not expect miracles if the rest of your meal is garbage. This is a modifier, not a permission slip. The best part is how easy it is to test. Wear a continuous glucose monitor for 2 weeks and compare meals with and without the vinegar protocol. You will see the difference on the graph within a single day. It is one of those rare interventions where the data is immediate and personal. Your pancreas will thank you. Protein first. The order in which you eat your food matters far more than most people realize. If you start your meal with protein before touching carbohydrates or fats, you trigger a cascade of hormonal signals that change how your body processes that meal. Protein eaten first stimulates the release of glucagon, like peptide 1 and peptide YY, 2 satiety hormones that slow gastric emptying and tell your brain you are full long before you overeat. Research from Weill Cornell Medical College showed that eating protein and vegetables before carbohydrates reduced post-meal glucose spikes by up to 73%. Think about what that means practically. Same food, same total calories, same macronutrient ratios. But just by rearranging the sequence, you get dramatically better blood sugar control and feel satisfied sooner. The protein creates a physical buffer in your stomach. It slows the rate at which everything behind it gets digested and absorbed. Carbohydrates that would have caused a sharp insulin spike now trickle in gradually because they are stuck behind a wall of slower digesting amino acids. This also has major implications for body composition. When you front-load protein, you naturally eat fewer total calories without trying because those satiety hormones do the heavy lifting. You are not white-knuckling portion control. Your biology handles it. Over weeks and months, that caloric reduction compounds into meaningful fat loss without any sense of deprivation. It is arguably the easiest dietary change you can make because it requires zero restriction. Here is the practical move. When your plate arrives, eat the meat or fish first, then the vegetables, then whatever starch or bread is on the table. If you are having a smoothie, make sure protein powder goes in and you are not just blending fruit with juice. This reordering trick is free, requires no willpower, and works every single time. Stop eating your meals in the wrong order. Controlled reps and mind-muscle connection. Most people in the gym are just moving weight from point A to point B. They use momentum, bounce at the bottom, and swing their bodies to get the bar up. That is exercise technically, but it leaves an enormous amount of muscle growth on the table. The real magic happens when you slow down and force the target muscle to do every bit of the work through a full range of motion with deliberate control. A controlled rep means a 2 to 3 second concentric phase, a brief pause at peak contraction, and a 3 to 4 second eccentric phase where you lower the weight. That eccentric portion is where the majority of mechanical tension and muscle damage occurs, and those are the two primary drivers of hypertrophy. Research from the European Journal of Applied Physiology confirms that emphasizing the eccentric phase produces significantly greater muscle protein synthesis compared to lifting fast with no tempo control. The mind-muscle connection is the other half of this equation. It sounds like gym bro pseudoscience, but it is backed by real neuroscience. A study in the European Journal of Sports Science found that when trained lifters focused attention on the target muscle during a curl, they experienced significantly more bicep activation and growth over 8 weeks compared to a group told to just move the weight. Internal focus literally changes motor recruitment patterns in your nervous system. Put these together and you have a complete shift in training quality. Drop the ego weight by about 20%. Pick a tempo and stick to it. Think about the muscle stretching and contracting on every rep. You will feel a deeper burn, get a better pump, and over months build more muscle with less joint stress and fewer injuries. Quality always beats quantity in the weight room. Cut ultra-processed foods. If you could only make one dietary change for the rest of your life, this would be the one. Ultra-processed foods are not just unhealthy in a vague, hand-wavy sense. They are engineered to override your satiety signals and drive overconsumption. These are products with ingredient lists full of things like high-fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oils, maltodextrin, and artificial flavoring compounds. They bear almost no resemblance to anything that exists in nature, and your body does not know how to regulate around them. A landmark randomized controlled trial from the National Institutes of Health put this to the test. Researchers gave 2 groups the exact same macronutrient ratios and let them eat as much as they wanted. The only difference was that one group ate ultra-processed foods and the other ate whole foods. The ultra-processed group ate 500 more calories per day on average and gained weight rapidly. Same protein, same fat, same carbs. The processing itself drove overeating. That is how powerful the effect is. The damage goes beyond calories. Ultra-processed foods disrupt the gut microbiome because they lack the fiber and polyphenols that feed beneficial bacteria. They promote systemic inflammation through advanced glycation end products created during manufacturing. They displace nutrient-dense whole foods, creating micronutrient deficiencies even when caloric intake is excessive. You can be simultaneously overfed and malnourished, and millions of people are. The fix is not perfection. It is the 80-20 rule applied ruthlessly. Read ingredient lists. If a product has more than 5 ingredients and you cannot pronounce half of them, put it back. Build meals around single ingredient foods: meat, fish, eggs, vegetables, fruit, nuts, legumes. Make that the default and treat everything else as an occasional exception, not a staple. Your hunger signals will recalibrate within 2 weeks and you will stop craving the garbage. Daily fermented foods. Your gut contains roughly 38 trillion bacteria, and the composition of that colony affects everything from your immune function to your mood to your body weight. One of the most effective ways to support a healthy and diverse gut microbiome is to eat fermented foods every single day. Not a probiotic capsule with 1 or 2 strains. Real fermented foods that contain a living ecosystem of beneficial microbes in concentrations that supplements cannot match. A Stanford study led by Justin Sonnenberg compared high-fiber diets to high-fermented food diets over 10 weeks. The fermented food group showed a significant increase in microbial diversity, which is the single best marker of gut health, while the high-fiber group did not. Even more striking, the fermented food group had measurable reductions in 19 inflammatory proteins, including interleukin-6, which is a key driver of chronic disease. Fiber is important, but fermented foods did something that fiber alone could not accomplish. The practical application is to rotate your sources. Sauerkraut, kimchi, full-fat yogurt, kefir, miso, tempeh, and kombucha all bring different microbial strains to the table. Variety matters because each species occupies a different ecological niche in your gut. Eating the same yogurt every day is better than nothing, but rotating through 3 or 4 different fermented foods across the week creates a much richer internal environment. Aim for 2 to 3 servings daily. One important caveat: buy refrigerated fermented foods or make your own. Most shelf-stable versions have been pasteurized, which kills the very bacteria you are trying to consume. If the sauerkraut is sitting on a room temperature shelf next to canned vegetables, it is dead. The living stuff is always in the refrigerated section, and it will say raw or unpasteurized on the label. This distinction is the difference between a genuine health intervention and expensive vinegar cabbage. Nasal breathing. You have 2 ways to get air into your body, and the one you use changes almost everything downstream. Mouth breathing is an emergency backup system. It delivers unfiltered, unhumidified, unconditioned air directly into your lower airways. Nasal breathing is the default mode your body was designed for, and the differences in physiological outcomes are staggering. Your nose filters particles, warms and humidifies air, and most critically, produces nitric oxide in the paranasal sinuses. That nitric oxide is the game changer. When you breathe through your nose, nitric oxide gets carried into your lungs, where it acts as a vasodilator, opening up blood vessels and increasing oxygen transfer efficiency by 15 to 20%. It is also antimicrobial, killing bacteria and viruses in the airway before they reach your lungs. Mouth breathers bypass this entire defense and gas exchange system. A study in the journal Nitric Oxide confirmed that nasal breathing significantly increases arterial oxygen saturation compared to oral breathing at the same respiratory rate. During exercise, nasal breathing forces you to work within your aerobic zone because the nasal passage creates resistance that naturally limits your respiratory rate. This builds a stronger aerobic base and improves carbon dioxide tolerance over time. Most people hyperventilate through their mouths during workouts, blowing off too much carbon dioxide and actually reducing oxygen delivery to their tissues through the Bohr effect. Nasal breathing corrects this by maintaining proper blood gas ratios. Start practicing during low-intensity activities. Walk while breathing only through your nose. Do your warm-ups nasally. Gradually extend it into harder training sessions. At night, consider mouth taping with surgical tape designed for skin to ensure you maintain nasal breathing during sleep. It sounds extreme until you try it and wake up without a dry mouth for the first time in years. Your sleep quality, recovery, and daytime energy will improve noticeably within the first week. Gratitude journaling. This one sounds soft, and that is exactly why most performance-oriented people skip it. But the neuroscience is hard, and the effects are measurable. Gratitude journaling physically rewires your prefrontal cortex and strengthens neural pathways associated with positive emotional regulation. A study by researchers at Indiana University found that participants who wrote gratitude letters showed significantly altered brain activity in the medial prefrontal cortex 3 months later. even when they were not actively practicing gratitude. The structural changes persisted. The mechanism involves a shift in your reticular activating system, the filter in your brainstem that decides what sensory information reaches your conscious awareness. When you consistently direct attention toward things you appreciate, your brain recalibrates that filter to notice more positive stimuli throughout the day. You are not ignoring problems. You are training your perception to catch the full picture instead of defaulting to threat detection mode, which is what an unmanaged brain does by evolutionary design. The protocol that works best in the literature is specific and brief. Write 3 things you are grateful for each morning. But here is the critical detail. Each entry must be specific and different from previous entries. Not, I am grateful for my family repeated every day. Instead, I am grateful my daughter laughed so hard at breakfast that milk came out of her nose. Specificity forces your brain to replay the experience and reactivate the associated emotional circuits. Generic entries produce almost no neurological benefit. Do this for 21 consecutive days, and you will notice a shift in baseline mood and stress reactivity. Robert Emmons at UC Davis has published extensively showing that consistent gratitude practice reduces cortisol by up to 23%. It takes 3 minutes. It costs nothing, and it compounds over time in ways that are difficult to overstate. The people dismissing this as woo have simply never done it properly. Morning bright light and evening dim light. Light is the single most powerful input to your circadian system, and most people get the timing completely backwards. They sit in dim indoor environments all morning, then blast their eyes with screens and overhead LEDs all evening. This pattern suppresses morning cortisol when you need it for alertness and delays melatonin onset when you need it for sleep. The fix is dead simple, but requires deliberate action. Within the first 30 to 60 minutes of waking, get outside and expose your eyes to natural sunlight for at least 10 minutes on a clear day or 30 minutes on an overcast day. Researchers at Stanford have demonstrated that this light exposure triggers a precise cortisol pulse from your adrenal glands that sets your circadian rhythm for the next 24 hours. It also initiates a timer for melatonin release roughly 14 to 16 hours later. Indoor lighting is typically 50 to 500 lux. Outdoor light, even on a cloudy day, exceeds 10,000 lux. There is no indoor substitute. The evening side is equally important. Starting about 2 to 3 hours before your target bedtime, reduce overhead lighting dramatically. Use dim lamps at table height or below. Switch screens to their warmest night mode setting. The goal is to allow melatonin to rise naturally rather than suppressing it with artificial blue light. Even brief bright light exposure in the late evening can delay melatonin onset by up to 60 minutes and reduce total melatonin production. This 2-part protocol creates a robust amplitude in your circadian rhythm. Think of it as giving your body a clear signal for when to be alert and when to wind down. People who do this consistently report falling asleep faster, sleeping deeper, and waking with more energy. No supplements or gadgets required. Just align your light exposure with what your biology expects, and everything downstream improves. Chew food thoroughly. You are probably swallowing your food way too fast. The average person chews each bite about 6 times before swallowing. The optimal range is closer to 25 to 40 chews, depending on the food. That sounds excessive until you understand what proper mastication actually does. Chewing breaks food into smaller particles, increasing the surface area available for digestive enzymes. It also mixes food with salivary amylase, which begins carbohydrate digestion in your mouth before anything even reaches your stomach. When you swallow large, poorly chewed chunks, your stomach and small intestine have to work significantly harder to break them down. This leads to bloating, gas, incomplete nutrient absorption, and a heavier feeling after meals. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that participants who chewed each bite 40 times consumed nearly 12% fewer calories than those who chewed 15 times. The slower pace gives your satiety hormones time to reach your brain before you overeat. There is also a hormonal dimension most people miss. Thorough chewing increases the release of cholecystokinin, a hormone that signals fullness to the hypothalamus and triggers bile release for fat digestion. It also enhances blood flow to the gut, improving the efficiency of nutrient transport across the intestinal wall. You are literally extracting more nutrition from the same food by chewing it longer. People with digestive complaints often see dramatic improvement just from this single change. The practical move is to put your fork down between bites. Chew until the food is a uniform paste with no identifiable chunks. This feels painfully slow at first, but within a week it becomes automatic. You will eat less, digest better, feel lighter after meals, and absorb more of the vitamins and minerals in your food. It costs nothing, requires no planning, and you can start at your very next meal. The simplest interventions are often the most overlooked. Front-load calories and tighter eating window. Most people eat their smallest meal in the morning and their largest at night. This is metabolically backwards. Your insulin sensitivity peaks in the morning and declines throughout the day, which means the same meal eaten at 7 in the morning produces a significantly lower blood sugar spike than the identical meal eaten at 8 at night. Research from the University of Murcia found that late eaters lost significantly less weight than early eaters, even when total caloric intake was identical. The practical shift is to make breakfast or lunch your biggest meal and keep dinner light. Front-loading your calories aligns food intake with your circadian insulin curve, meaning your body processes those nutrients more efficiently and stores less as fat. This is not about eating less. It is about eating the same amount at a time when your body is primed to use it. Think of your metabolism like a furnace that burns hottest in the first half of the day and gradually cools. Pairing this with a time-restricted eating window of 8 to 10 hours amplifies the benefit. If your first bite is at 8 in the morning, your last bite should be by 6 in the evening. This gives your body a solid 14 hours without incoming food, during which it can focus on repair, cellular cleanup, and fat oxidation. Research from Sachin Panda at the Salk Institute shows that time-restricted feeding improves metabolic markers even without changing what or how much you eat. The combination of front-loaded calories and a tighter window is more effective than either strategy alone. You get better glucose control, improved lipid profiles, and enhanced circadian alignment. Start by making dinner your smallest meal and closing the kitchen after it. You will sleep better because your body is not diverting energy to digestion while trying to repair itself overnight. Social connection. Loneliness will kill you faster than obesity. That is not hyperbole. A meta-analysis led by Julianne Holt-Lundstad at Brigham Young University analyzed over 300,000 participants and found that people with strong social connections had a 50% greater likelihood of survival over the study period compared to those who were isolated. The effect size rivals that of quitting smoking. Yet almost nobody treats their social life as a health intervention. The biology is direct. Social isolation increases cortisol output, elevates inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein and interleukin-6, and activates the sympathetic nervous system in a chronic, low-level stress response. Your body literally interprets being alone as a threat. From an evolutionary perspective, isolation from the group meant vulnerability to predators and starvation. That wiring has not changed. When you are chronically disconnected, your immune system shifts into a pro-inflammatory state that accelerates aging and disease. Quality matters more than quantity. You do not need 50 friends. You need a handful of relationships where there is genuine reciprocity, vulnerability, and consistent contact. Research from the Harvard study of adult development, which has tracked participants for over 80 years, found that the single strongest predictor of health and happiness at age 80 was the quality of close relationships at age 50. Not cholesterol, not fitness, not income, relationships. The practical intervention is scheduling. Treat social time like you treat workouts. Put it on your calendar. Call someone instead of texting. Share a meal with another person at least 3 times per week. Join something where attendance is expected, whether that is a sports league, a book club, or a volunteer group. Passive social media scrolling does not count and may actually worsen feelings of isolation. Real connection requires presence, effort, and consistency, just like every other health habit that works. Posture breaks during work. Sitting in the same position for hours does not just make your back hurt. It creates a cascade of structural and metabolic problems that compound over years. When you sit hunched forward, your hip flexors shorten, your thoracic spine rounds, your shoulders internally rotate, and your deep cervical flexors weaken. This creates a pattern of dysfunction that eventually causes pain in places you would never connect to sitting, like your knees, your jaw, and even your breathing mechanics. The metabolic side is equally concerning. Research published in the Annals of Internal Medicine found that prolonged uninterrupted sitting is associated with increased all-cause mortality independent of exercise habits. You can work out for an hour every morning and still suffer the consequences of sitting motionless for the other 8. The key variable is not total sitting time, but the length of each unbroken bout. Breaking up sitting with brief movement every 30 to 45 minutes dramatically reduces the negative metabolic signaling. Your posture break does not need to be complicated. Stand up, reach your arms overhead, do a 30-second hip flexor stretch on each side, roll your shoulders back 10 times, squeeze your glutes hard for 5 seconds. The entire sequence takes under 2 minutes and resets the muscular tension patterns that accumulate during desk work. You are not trying to get a workout. You are interrupting the static loading pattern before it becomes problematic. Set a timer on your phone or computer for every 30 minutes. When it goes off, move. This is non-negotiable if you work at a desk. Over time, these micro breaks add up to dramatically better spinal health, reduce lower back pain, improve circulation, and even better cognitive performance. Your brain works better when blood is actually flowing. Treat these breaks as part of your job, not a distraction from it. Optimize air quality, temperature, and humidity. The air inside your home is almost certainly worse than the air outside, and you spend roughly 90% of your time indoors. The Environmental Protection Agency estimates that indoor air can be 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air due to volatile organic compounds off-gassing from furniture, cleaning products, building materials, and cooking. You are breathing this constantly, and your lungs are absorbing those compounds with every single breath. The first step is filtration. A HEPA air purifier in your bedroom and main living space removes 99.97% of airborne particles down to 0.3 microns. That includes dust, mold spores, pet dander, and fine particulate matter that drives respiratory inflammation. If you live near a busy road, this is not optional. Studies have linked indoor particulate matter exposure to increased cardiovascular events and reduced cognitive performance, even at levels well below outdoor regulatory thresholds. Temperature matters more than most people realize for sleep specifically. Your core body temperature needs to drop by about 1 to 2 degrees for sleep onset. The ideal bedroom temperature is between 60 and 67 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 15 to 19 Celsius. Too warm, and your body cannot initiate the thermoregulatory cascade that triggers melatonin release and deep sleep architecture. A study in the journal Sleep Medicine Reviews confirmed that ambient temperature is one of the strongest environmental predictors of sleep quality. Humidity sits in a sweet spot between 30 and 50% relative humidity. Below 30, your mucous membranes dry out, making you more susceptible to respiratory infections and worsening conditions like eczema. Above 50, mold and dust mite populations explode. A simple hygrometer will tell you where you stand. Use a humidifier or dehumidifier as needed. These three variables of air purity, temperature, and humidity form the invisible foundation of your indoor health environment. Seek discomfort and grow. There is a small region in your brain called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex that neuroscientists are now calling the seat of willpower. Brain imaging studies show that this area is larger in people who regularly do things they do not want to do. Athletes, meditators, and people who successfully maintain long-term health habits all have a more developed anterior mid-cingulate cortex. And here is the key finding. When people stop challenging themselves, it shrinks. Research from Stanford and the University of California, San Diego has shown that the anterior mid-cingulate cortex activates specifically when you resist temptation or push through voluntary discomfort. It is not activated by habits you enjoy. It lights up when the task is effortful and you would rather quit. Every time you choose the harder path, you are essentially doing a rep for this brain region. Cold showers when you want warmth. Workouts when you want the couch. Difficult conversations when you want to avoid them. This has profound implications for aging. Studies of superagers, people over 80 who maintain the cognitive function of 50-year-olds, consistently find that their anterior mid-cingulate cortex has not atrophied the way it does in typical aging. The researchers believe that a lifetime of voluntary challenge preserved this structure. In contrast, a life of pure comfort and avoidance allows it to wither, and with it goes your capacity for discipline and resilience. The practical application is to deliberately incorporate one thing you do not want to do every day. It does not have to be extreme. Take the stairs when the elevator is right there. Finish with cold water at the end of your shower. Do the task you have been procrastinating on before checking your phone. Each act of voluntary discomfort is a deposit into your neurological willpower account, building the very structure that makes future hard things easier. Flush toilet with lid closed. This one sounds trivial until you learn about the toilet plume. Every time you flush a toilet with the lid open, it generates an aerosol spray that launches microscopic droplets of whatever is in that bowl up to 6 feet into the air. Those droplets contain bacteria, viruses, and fecal particles that settle on every surface in your bathroom, including your toothbrush, your towels, and the countertop where you set your contact lenses. A study published in the American Journal of Infection Control used fluorescent markers to visualize exactly how far these particles travel. The results were stunning. Particles were found on surfaces throughout the entire bathroom, and they remained viable for hours after flushing. We are talking about organisms like E. coli, norovirus, and Clostridioides difficile, all of which can cause serious gastrointestinal illness. Your bathroom might look clean, but after an open lid flush, it is coated in an invisible layer of microbial contamination. Closing the lid before you flush reduces this aerosol dispersal by over 90%. It does not eliminate it entirely because some spray escapes through the gap between the lid and the seat, but the reduction is massive. This is especially critical if you store your toothbrush within a few feet of the toilet, which most people do because most bathrooms are not that large. Moving your toothbrush into a closed cabinet is the second line of defense. Make this a non-negotiable habit. Every single flush, lid goes down first. If you live with other people, make it a household rule. It takes half a second and it prevents you from literally brushing your teeth with aerosolized fecal matter. While you are at it, replace your toothbrush every 3 months and consider using an ultraviolet toothbrush sanitizer. Some health upgrades require diet changes and lifestyle overhauls. This one just requires you to close a lid. Balance sodium levels. Sodium has been unfairly demonized for decades. The standard advice to slash sodium intake came from population studies that conflated processed food consumption with sodium itself. When you eat processed food, you get sodium alongside industrial seed oils, refined sugars, and artificial additives. Blaming the sodium is like blaming the steering wheel for car crashes. A more nuanced view has emerged from recent research, and it changes the practical advice considerably. A massive Lancet study following over 100,000 people across 18 countries found that both very low and very high sodium intakes were associated with increased cardiovascular events. The sweet spot was between 3 and 5 grams of sodium per day, which is actually higher than most government guidelines recommend. If you eat whole foods, exercise regularly, and sweat during workouts, you may actually need more sodium than you think, not less. Hyponatremia from insufficient sodium causes fatigue, headaches, muscle cramps, and cognitive fog. The critical nuance is the ratio between sodium and potassium. These two minerals work as a seesaw, regulating fluid balance, nerve signaling, and blood pressure through a shared transport system. Most people get far too much sodium relative to potassium, not because sodium is too high, but because potassium is too low. The target ratio should be roughly 1:2. Increasing potassium-rich foods like avocados, sweet potatoes, and leafy greens often does more for blood pressure than cutting sodium. If you are active and eating whole foods, do not fear salting your meals. Use unrefined mineral-rich salt rather than stripped table salt. Pay attention to how you feel during and after workouts. If you cramp easily, feel dizzy when standing, or get headaches after sweating, you likely need more sodium, not less. A sedentary person eating fast food 3 times a day has very different sodium needs than someone training hard on a clean diet. Measure health metrics consistently. What gets measured gets managed, and most people are flying completely blind when it comes to their actual health data. They go to the doctor once a year, get a basic blood panel, and assume everything is fine until something catastrophic happens. That is like checking your bank account once a year and hoping you are not broke. The real power of health tracking comes from consistent measurement over time, because trends matter infinitely more than single data points. Start with the basics. Track your body weight at the same time every morning after using the bathroom. Weigh daily, but only look at 7-day rolling averages, because daily weight fluctuates by 2 to 4 pounds from water retention and food volume. Track your resting heart rate as a proxy for cardiovascular fitness and recovery. Track sleep duration and quality through a wearable. These 3 metrics alone, measured consistently, tell you more about your health trajectory than an annual checkup. The next level is periodic biomarker testing. get a comprehensive blood panel every 6 months that goes beyond the standard lipid panel. You want fasting insulin, hemoglobin A1C, high sensitivity, C reactive protein, a complete thyroid panel, and vitamin D levels. These markers catch problems years before symptoms appear. Fasting insulin can be elevated for a decade before fasting glucose ever rises. By the time you get a diabetes diagnosis, the dysfunction has been building for years. The key principle is consistency, not perfection of any single number. A resting heart rate of 62 means nothing in isolation. A resting heart rate climbing from 58 to 68 over 6 months tells you something is wrong with your recovery or fitness. Track the same metrics at the same time with the same method and let trends guide your decisions. Data removes guessing and replaces it with clarity. Use non-toxic cookware. That non-stick pan you use every day is probably coated with polytetrafluoroethylene, more commonly known by a brand name most people recognize. When heated above 400 degrees Fahrenheit, these coatings begin to break down and release perfluoroalkyl substances and toxic fumes into your food and kitchen air. These are the same class of chemicals known as forever chemicals because they do not break down in the environment or in your body. They accumulate in your blood and organs over years of exposure. The health implications are well documented. Studies have linked perfluoroalkyl substance exposure to thyroid dysfunction, immune suppression, elevated cholesterol, hormone disruption, and increased cancer risk. A major study published in Environmental Health Perspectives found measurable levels of these compounds in the blood of 98% of Americans tested. The sources are multiple, but cookware is one of the most direct and controllable routes of exposure because you are heating the chemicals and eating what they touch. The swap is straightforward. Replace non-stick pans with cast iron, stainless steel, or carbon steel. Cast iron is naturally non-stick when properly seasoned and leaches small amounts of dietary iron into your food. Stainless steel is inert and works perfectly for searing. Carbon steel heats fast, develops a natural seasoning like cast iron, and weighs less. All three last decades instead of the 2 to 3 years you get from a non-stick pan before the coating starts flaking. The transition does not need to happen all at once. Start by replacing the pan you use most often. Learn to preheat it properly and use adequate cooking fat, which is the secret to preventing sticking on uncoated surfaces. Within a week, you will adjust your technique and wonder why you ever needed a chemical coating. Your kitchen should not be a source of chronic toxin exposure. Remove the most obvious offender and work from there. Stand while working in the morning. There is a specific window in your day when standing at your desk pays the highest metabolic dividend, and that window is the first 3 to 4 hours after waking. Your body is most insulin sensitive in the morning, and standing during this period amplifies that advantage. Research from the University of Leicester found that replacing sitting with standing in the morning hours significantly reduced postprandial glucose and insulin responses compared to the same standing done in the afternoon. Standing also engages your postural muscles in a low-grade continuous contraction that keeps your metabolic rate slightly elevated above what sitting provides. It is not dramatic on its own, maybe an extra 50 calories per hour, but multiplied across 3 to 4 hours. Every morning it adds up across weeks and months. More importantly, standing promotes better thoracic extension and hip positioning, counteracting the forward slouch that desk workers develop over years of sitting. The mistake people make is trying to stand all day. That is not the goal, and it creates its own problems, including lower back fatigue, varicose vein risk, and foot pain. The sweet spot is standing for your morning work block, then transitioning to sitting after lunch. This gives you the metabolic benefit during your peak insulin sensitivity window, and avoids the diminishing returns and discomfort of prolonged standing. A sight-stand desk makes this transition seamless. If you do not have an adjustable desk, a simple riser on top of your existing desk works fine. Position your monitor at eye height and your keyboard at elbow height. Wear supportive shoes or stand on an anti-fatigue mat. The key is making the morning standing block your default. Within a week, it will feel normal. Within a month, you will notice better energy in the morning and less of that post-lunch crash that plagues desk workers. Warm-ups and mobility. Skipping your warm-up is the fastest way to guarantee an injury that sets you back weeks or months. Yet most people either skip it entirely or do a few token arm circles before loading a barbell. A proper warm-up raises your core temperature, increases blood flow to working muscles, improves synovial fluid viscosity in your joints, and primes your nervous system for the specific movement patterns you are about to perform. It takes 10 to 15 minutes, and it makes everything that follows safer and more effective. The structure matters. Start with 3 to 5 minutes of general movement to raise your heart rate. A bike, a light jog, or jumping jacks all work. Then shift to dynamic stretching that targets the joints and muscles you will use in your workout. Leg swings, hip circles, thoracic rotations, and band pull-aparts cover most upper and lower body sessions. Finish with 1 or 2 ramp-up sets of your first exercise at 50 and 75% of your working weight. This sequence prepares your tissues progressively rather than shocking them. Mobility work is the other piece most people neglect entirely. Your joints need to move through their full range of motion regularly, or they gradually lose that range. Tight hips, restricted shoulders, and stiff ankles are not inevitable consequences of aging. They are consequences of never taking your joints through their available motion. Spend 5 to 10 minutes daily working on the areas where you are most restricted, especially hips, thoracic spine, and ankles. The return on this investment is enormous. Better mobility means better form on every exercise, which means better muscle activation and less joint stress. People who warm up consistently get injured far less frequently, recover faster between sessions, and train harder because their bodies are prepared. 10 minutes of preparation saves weeks of rehabilitation. That math should be obvious. Drink liquids between meals. There is a persistent debate about whether drinking water during meals dilutes your digestive enzymes and impairs digestion. The truth is nuanced. Small sips with food are fine and can actually help move food through your system. But large volumes of liquid consumed alongside a meal can dilute gastric acid concentration and slow the breakdown of protein in your stomach. The better strategy is to do most of your hydrating between meals and keep liquid intake moderate during eating. Your stomach maintains a specific acidic environment with a pH between 1.5 and 3.5 that is essential for protein denaturation and pepsin activation. When you flood the stomach with 16 ounces of water right before eating, you temporarily raise that pH and reduce the effectiveness of your digestive enzymes. This is especially relevant for people who already struggle with low stomach acid, a condition that becomes more common with age and affects nutrient absorption significantly. The practical protocol is simple. Hydrate aggressively between meals. Drink the majority of your daily water intake in the morning before your first meal and during the gaps between meals throughout the day. During the meal itself, limit yourself to 4 to 6 ounces of liquid, just enough to aid swallowing. If you want to drink something warm like tea to support digestion, have it 15 to 20 minutes after finishing your food rather than during. This approach also has a secondary benefit. When you prehydrate before meals, you arrive at the table with your thirst already satisfied, which means you are not confusing thirst for hunger. Many people overeat simply because they are mildly dehydrated and mistake the signal. By separating your drinking from your eating windows, you get cleaner hunger signals, stronger digestion, and better overall hydration. It is a simple timing adjustment that costs nothing and fixes two problems at once. Filtered water and strategic hydration timing. Municipal tap water passes regulatory standards, but those standards were set decades ago and do not account for many contaminants now found in water supplies. Chlorine, chloramine disinfection byproducts, trace pharmaceuticals, microplastics, and heavy metals like lead all show up in routine testing of city water systems across the country. You are drinking these every single day if your water is unfiltered. The question is not whether to filter, but which level of filtration matches your situation. A basic activated carbon filter removes chlorine taste, some volatile organic compounds, and larger particulates. It is a good starting point, but misses heavy metals and pharmaceuticals. A reverse osmosis system strips nearly everything, producing extremely pure output. The trade-off is that it also removes beneficial minerals, so you need to remineralize with trace mineral drops. Whichever system you choose, replace filters on schedule because expired filters can actually add contaminants back. Timing your hydration matters almost as much as the quality. Drink 16 to 20 ounces of filtered water immediately upon waking. You lose about a pound of water through respiration and perspiration during sleep, and your body wakes up in a mildly dehydrated state. That morning, bolus kickstarts kidney function, aids bowel motility, and helps clear metabolic waste products that accumulated overnight. Space the remainder of your intake across the day rather than chugging large amounts at once. Stop drinking large volumes about 2 hours before bed to minimize nighttime bathroom trips that fragment your sleep. Hydration needs vary based on body weight, activity level, and climate, but a general target is half your body weight in ounces per day. If your urine is pale yellow, you are on track. Dark yellow means you need more. Completely clear means you may be flushing electrolytes. Filtered water, timed right, is the foundation every other health habit builds on. Eat high-fiber foods earlier. Fiber timing is an underappreciated lever for blood sugar management. When you eat high-fiber foods at the beginning of a meal, that fiber forms a viscous gel in your stomach and small intestine that physically slows the absorption of everything eaten afterward. This is not about total fiber intake across the day. It is about front-loading it so it acts as a gateway for the rest of your food. A study in the Journal of Clinical Biochemistry and Nutrition found that eating vegetables before carbohydrates significantly reduced postprandial glucose in both diabetic and healthy subjects. The mechanism is mechanical and chemical. Soluble fiber from foods like beans, lentils, artichokes, and oats binds water and creates a thick matrix that slows gastric emptying. This means glucose from any carbohydrates eaten later enters your bloodstream at a slower rate, preventing the sharp spikes that drive insulin resistance over time. Insoluble fiber from foods like leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables adds bulk and sweeps your intestinal lining, supporting healthy bowel transit. The strategic move is to start every meal with a fiber-rich component. A side salad, a small serving of beans, or a handful of raw vegetables before your main course creates that protective buffer. This approach stacks powerfully with the protein-first strategy, because protein and fiber together create the strongest possible brake on glucose absorption. Layer your meals deliberately instead of eating everything mixed together. Aim for 30 to 40 grams of fiber per day from whole food sources. Most people get about 15, which is woefully inadequate. Increase gradually over 2 to 3 weeks to let your gut microbiome adapt. Otherwise, you will experience bloating and gas as the new bacterial populations establish themselves. Once adapted, your digestion will be smoother, your blood sugar flatter, and your satiety between meals dramatically improved. Front-load the fiber and let it do the work. Cycle health habits. Your body adapts to everything. The same workout that devastated you 3 months ago barely registers now. The same supplement protocol that dramatically improved your energy starts feeling like a placebo after 6 weeks. This is not failure. It is homeostasis doing exactly what it evolved to do. The solution is strategic cycling, periodically rotating your habits and inputs to prevent your body from fully adapting and to maintain the stimulus for continued improvement. The principle applies broadly. Cold exposure benefits are strongest when your body has not fully acclimated to the temperature. Supplement effects diminish as receptor sensitivity downregulates. Training adaptations plateau when the stimulus stays constant. Even dietary patterns can stall because your metabolism adjusts to predictable caloric and macronutrient inputs. The human body is a relentless adaptation machine, and the only way to keep it responding is to periodically change the inputs. Practical cycling looks different for each domain. For supplements, consider 4 weeks on and 1 week off for things like creatine, adaptogens, and nootropics. For training, change your program structure every 4 to 8 weeks by varying rep ranges, exercise selection, or training volume. For dietary patterns, alternate between higher and lower carbohydrate days, or periodically shift your eating window. The key is planned variation rather than random chaos. This concept also applies to recovery modalities. If you use sauna every day, its hormetic stress effect diminishes as heat shock protein production normalizes. Cycling to 3 or 4 sessions per week with occasional full weeks off maintains the adaptive response. The same applies to any stressor you impose deliberately. The goal is never to let your body reach complete equilibrium with any single intervention. Keep rotating, keep adapting, and you will keep progressing long after people on static routines have plateaued entirely. Delay caffeine by 90 minutes. Most people pour their first cup of coffee within minutes of waking up. This feels necessary, but it is actually undermining the very alertness system you are trying to support. When you wake up, your body naturally releases cortisol in what is called the cortisol awakening response. This surge peaks about 30 to 45 minutes after waking and is designed to make you alert without any external stimulation. Drinking caffeine during this window blunts the natural cortisol peak and creates dependency. Caffeine works by blocking adenosine receptors in your brain. Adenosine is the molecule that builds up while you are awake and makes you feel progressively sleepier. But in the first 90 minutes after waking, adenosine levels are still relatively low. Consuming caffeine when there is not much adenosine to block means you are getting a weaker effect and simultaneously interfering with cortisol signaling. By waiting 90 minutes, you let cortisol do its job and then deploy caffeine when adenosine has actually accumulated enough to warrant blocking. The practical result is that your caffeine hits harder and lasts more effectively through the morning and early afternoon. People who make this switch consistently report better sustained energy, fewer afternoon crashes, and reduced total caffeine consumption because each cup does more. You are not cutting caffeine. You are timing it to work with your biology instead of against it. The adjustment period is about a week. Those first few mornings will feel sluggish because you have trained yourself to expect caffeine immediately. Push through it. Hydrate. Get morning light exposure and move your body in that first 90 minutes instead. By day 7, your natural cortisol awakening response will be stronger because it has not been suppressed daily. Then when you do drink your coffee, the effect will be noticeably sharper and cleaner. Better energy through better timing. Optimize omega-3 ratio. The ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids in your diet is one of the most important inflammatory markers you can control through food. Our ancestors consumed these fats in roughly a 1-to-1 ratio. The modern Western diet delivers them at roughly 15-to-1 or even 20-to-1 in favor of omega-6. This imbalance drives chronic low-grade inflammation because omega-6 fatty acids are precursors to pro-inflammatory signaling molecules called eicosanoids. The fix has two sides. First, reduce omega-6 intake by eliminating industrial seed oils from your diet. Soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, sunflower oil, and safflower oil are loaded with linoleic acid, the primary omega-6 fat. These oils are in virtually every processed and restaurant food. Check labels, and you will find them everywhere. Replace them with olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, butter, or ghee, all of which have far lower omega-6 content and do not promote the same inflammatory cascade. Second, increase your omega-3 intake, specifically the long-chain forms EPA and DHA found in fatty fish. Salmon, sardines, mackerel, and anchovies are the best sources. Aim for 2 to 3 servings per week. If that is not realistic, supplement with a quality fish oil or algae oil, providing at least 2 grams of combined EPA and DHA daily. Plant-based omega-3s from flax and chia are primarily ALA, which converts to EPA and DHA at only 5 to 10%. The downstream effects of correcting this ratio are wide-ranging. Lower inflammation, improved brain function, better joint health, reduced cardiovascular risk, and enhanced recovery from exercise. Studies show that higher omega-3 index values are associated with significantly lower all-cause mortality. This is not a trendy supplement. It is a fundamental dietary correction that addresses one of the most pervasive nutritional imbalances in modern life. Use creatine monohydrate. Creatine is the single most studied supplement in sports nutrition history, with over 500 peer-reviewed studies confirming its safety and effectiveness. Yet most people either ignore it or associate it only with bodybuilders. That is a mistake because creatine benefits extend far beyond muscle size. It is a naturally occurring compound that your body uses to regenerate adenosine triphosphate, the primary energy currency of every cell. More creatine means faster energy replenishment during high-intensity efforts. For exercise performance, the evidence is overwhelming. Creatine monohydrate increases strength, power output, and lean muscle mass when combined with resistance training. A meta-analysis in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition found average strength increases of 8% and power output gains of 14% with creatine supplementation. It works by saturating your phosphocreatine stores, allowing you to squeeze out 1 or 2 extra reps at a given weight, which compounds into significantly greater training volume over weeks. The cognitive benefits are equally compelling and far less discussed. Your brain consumes roughly 20% of your total energy budget. Creatine supplementation has been shown to improve working memory, reduce mental fatigue, and enhance performance on cognitive tasks, particularly under sleep deprivation or stress. A study in the Proceedings of the Royal Society found that creatine improved both memory and intelligence test scores. The protocol is simple. Take 3 to 5 grams of creatine monohydrate daily with no need to cycle or load. Dissolve it in water at any time. It does not matter if you take it before or after training. Consistency matters because it takes 2 to 4 weeks to fully saturate your muscles. Ignore fancy forms like creatine hydrochloride or buffered creatine. Monohydrate has the most evidence, the highest purity, and the lowest cost. This is as close to a no-brainer supplement as exists. Spice loading for antioxidants. The spice rack in your kitchen is a pharmacy hiding in plain sight. Turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, black pepper, oregano, clove, and rosemary contain some of the highest concentrations of bioactive compounds found in any food category. Gram for gram, these spices deliver more antioxidant and anti-inflammatory potency than most fruits and vegetables. The problem is that most people use them in trivial amounts, a pinch here and a dash there, which is not enough to move the needle. Curcumin, the active compound in turmeric, is one of the most studied natural anti-inflammatory agents in existence. It inhibits nuclear factor kappa B, a master switch for inflammatory gene expression. But curcumin has notoriously poor bioavailability on its own. Pairing it with piperine from black pepper increases absorption by up to 2,000%. This is why traditional Indian cuisine almost always combines turmeric with black pepper. They figured out the bioavailability hack centuries before we had the science to explain it. Cinnamon has demonstrated impressive effects on blood sugar regulation. Ceylon cinnamon specifically has been shown to improve insulin sensitivity and reduce fasting glucose levels. Ginger contains gingerols that reduce muscle soreness, improve gastric motility, and combat nausea through serotonin receptor antagonism. Oregano oil is one of the most potent natural antimicrobials available. Each of these compounds works through a different pathway, which is why variety in your spice use matters more than megadosing any single one. The practical approach is aggressive. Add a full teaspoon of turmeric with black pepper to your morning eggs or smoothie. Stir Ceylon cinnamon into your coffee. Cook with generous amounts of ginger, garlic, and oregano. Make golden milk with turmeric, ginger, pepper, and coconut oil in the evening. When spices are used in meaningful quantities daily, they function as low-dose pharmacological agents that reduce inflammation and protect against oxidative damage. Stop seasoning timidly. Supplement vitamin D, 3+K2, and magnesium. These 3 nutrients work as a synergistic trio, and taking one without the others creates problems. Vitamin D3 increases calcium absorption from your gut, but without vitamin K2 to direct that calcium into your bones and teeth, it ends up deposited in your arteries and soft tissues. Magnesium is required for the enzyme that converts vitamin D into its active form. If you are magnesium deficient, which roughly 50% of the population is, your vitamin D supplement is not working at full capacity. The evidence for vitamin D3 is staggering. Over 1 billion people worldwide are deficient, and the consequences extend far beyond bone health. Low vitamin D levels are associated with increased rates of depression, autoimmune conditions, cardiovascular disease, respiratory infections, and all-cause mortality. A meta-analysis in the British Medical Journal found that vitamin D supplementation reduced the risk of acute respiratory infection by 12% overall and by 70% in people who were severely deficient. Vitamin K2 exists in 2 main forms, MK4 and MK7. MK7 has a longer half-life and is more effective at activating osteocalcin, the protein that binds calcium to bone matrix. Food sources include natto, hard cheeses, and egg yolks, but most people need supplementation to reach therapeutic levels. Pair 100 to 200 micrograms of MK7 daily with your vitamin D 3 dose. Magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions, including energy production, muscle contraction, and nervous system regulation. Most people benefit from 300 to 400 milligrams daily. Magnesium glycinate is best for relaxation and sleep. Magnesium threonate crosses the blood-brain barrier for cognitive support. Avoid magnesium oxide, which has poor absorption. Take these three together, and you address the most common nutrient gaps in the modern diet. Eat organ meats. Organ meats are the original multivitamin. Before supplements existed, every traditional culture prized the organs of animals above the muscle meat that dominates modern diets. Liver alone contains more bioavailable nutrients per gram than any other food on the planet. A single serving of beef liver delivers massive amounts of preformed vitamin A, all the B vitamins including B12, in quantities that supplements cannot match: copper, iron, and choline. These are nutrients that drive energy production, detoxification, and cognitive function. The nutrient density gap between organ meats and muscle meat is enormous. Chicken breast has protein and not much else. Beef liver has protein plus a pharmacy worth of micronutrients. Heart is the richest natural source of coenzyme Q10, which is essential for mitochondrial energy production and cardiac function. Kidney provides high concentrations of selenium and B12. These are not fringe nutrients. They are foundational compounds that your body requires in quantities most people never reach through standard diets. The common objection is taste. Most people did not grow up eating liver and find the flavor intense. There are workarounds. Blend raw liver into ground beef at a ratio of 1 part liver to 4 parts muscle meat. Season it heavily and form it into burgers or meatballs. The liver flavor disappears completely. Alternatively, freeze liver into small pill-sized pieces and swallow them like supplements with water. Or use desiccated organ capsules from grass-fed sources if you cannot stomach the texture at all. Aim for 1 to 2 servings of liver per week and incorporate heart and kidney when possible. Source from pasture-raised grass, finished animals, because organs concentrate whatever the animal was exposed to. The ancestral approach of eating the whole animal was not tradition for its own sake. It was an intuitive response to the reality that the most vital compounds are stored in the organs, not the muscles. Build a Zone 2 cardio base. Zone 2 cardio is the intensity where you can hold a conversation but would rather not. It is the sweet spot where your body primarily burns fat for fuel and your mitochondria get the strongest training stimulus for endurance adaptation. Most people either do nothing or go too hard, spending their cardio time in Zone 3 or 4, where they are burning glycogen instead of fat and accumulating fatigue without building a proper aerobic foundation. The physiological magic of Zone 2 happens inside your mitochondria. At this intensity, your slow twitch muscle fibers are doing the majority of the work, and those fibers are packed with mitochondria. Consistent Zone 2 training increases both the number and efficiency of mitochondria in your muscle cells. This is called mitochondrial biogenesis, and it is the foundation of metabolic health. More efficient mitochondria mean better fat oxidation, improved insulin sensitivity, and greater capacity for sustained energy output throughout the day. The practical target is 150 to 180 minutes per week of Zone 2 cardio, spread across 3 to 5 sessions. Walking fast uphill, easy cycling, light jogging, rowing, or swimming all work. Your heart rate should be roughly 60 to 70% of your maximum. The easiest test is the talk test. If you can speak in full sentences, but the effort feels sustained and noticeable, you are in the right zone. If you are gasping between words, you are too high. This is not glamorous training. It is boring and slow, and your ego will fight it. But the aerobic base you build with Zone 2 allows you to perform at higher intensities without breaking down. Elite endurance athletes spend 80% of their training in Zone 2. They know the foundation determines how high you can build. Skip it, and every other form of exercise becomes less effective and more draining. Push VO2 Max with the 4x4 protocol. Your VO2 Max is the maximum amount of oxygen your body can utilize during exercise, and it is the single strongest predictor of all-cause mortality that we have. A study in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that people in the lowest fitness quartile had a 500% higher mortality risk compared to the highest quartile. No other biomarker, not blood pressure, not cholesterol, not fasting glucose, predicts lifespan as powerfully as cardiorespiratory fitness. The most effective protocol for improving VO2 max is the 4x4 method developed at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. It consists of 4 intervals of 4 minutes at 90 to 95% of your maximum heart rate, separated by 3 minutes of active recovery at 60 to 70%. You can do this on a bike, treadmill, rower, or running outside. The total session takes about 25 minutes and should be performed 2 to 3 times per week. This protocol works because it forces your cardiovascular system to operate near its ceiling for sustained periods. Unlike short sprints that rely on anaerobic systems, 4-minute intervals are long enough to fully tax aerobic capacity. Your heart pumps at maximal stroke volume, your lungs extract oxygen at peak efficiency, and your muscles demand more delivery. The adaptation signal is unmistakable. Your body responds by increasing cardiac output, capillary density, and oxidative capacity. The key is intensity. Those 4-minute efforts should feel brutally hard. You should want to stop by minute 3. If the intervals feel manageable, push harder. Use a heart rate monitor to verify you are reaching 90 to 95% of your max. The payoff is a measurable improvement in VO2 max within 6 to 8 weeks, and with it, a fundamentally lower risk of dying from nearly everything. Train grip strength. Grip strength is the most underrated predictor of overall health and longevity that almost nobody trains deliberately. A massive prospective study published in The Lancet, following nearly 140,000 participants, found that every 5 kilogram decrease in grip strength was associated with a 17% increase in cardiovascular mortality and a 16% increase in all-cause mortality. Grip strength outperformed systolic blood pressure as a predictor of death. Let that sink in for a moment. The reason grip strength is so predictive is that it serves as a proxy for total body muscle mass, neuromuscular integrity, and systemic vitality. Your grip is not just about your forearms. It reflects the functional capacity of your entire kinetic chain. People who maintain strong grips into old age also tend to maintain independence, mobility, and the ability to perform daily activities. Weak grip correlates with sarcopenia, frailty, cognitive decline, and increased fall risk. It is a canary in the coal mine for overall physical deterioration. Training grip is simple and can be done anywhere. Dead hangs from a pull-up bar are the most effective single exercise. Hang with straight arms for as long as you can, aiming to build towards 60 to 90 seconds. Farmer carries, where you walk while holding heavy dumbbells or kettlebells at your sides, build grip endurance and core stability simultaneously. Plate pinches, thick bar holds, and towel pull-ups add variety and challenge different grip types. Train grip 2 to 3 times per week and track your progress. Grip strength responds quickly, and the carryover to every other lift is immediate. A stronger grip means heavier deadlifts, better pull-ups, and more secure overhead presses. Beyond the gym, it means opening jars at 90, carrying groceries without strain, and maintaining the physical autonomy that defines quality of life in later decades. This is functional strength at its most fundamental. Neuromotor balance training. After age 30, your balance begins declining at a rate that accelerates each decade. Most people do not notice until they trip over a curb and suddenly realize their recovery reflexes are gone. Falls are the leading cause of injury-related death in adults over 65, and the decline in proprioception and vestibular function that enables those falls starts decades earlier. Balance is a skill. If you do not train it, you lose it, and by the time you need it most, it may be too late to rebuild. The neuroscience of balance involves three systems working together. Your visual system, your vestibular system in the inner ear, and proprioceptors throughout your muscles and joints all send signals to your cerebellum and motor cortex. These systems must communicate rapidly and accurately for you to stay upright. Training balance means stressing these systems so they become faster and more reliable. Single leg stands, tandem walking, eyes closed, balance challenges, and unstable surface training all accomplish this. Start with 30 seconds of single leg standing on each side. When that becomes easy, close your eyes. When that becomes easy, stand on a foam pad with eyes closed. Each progression removes a sensory input or adds instability, forcing the remaining systems to work harder. This is neuroplasticity applied to motor control. Your brain physically rewires to process balance signals more efficiently with consistent practice. A study in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that the ability to stand on one leg for 10 seconds was strongly associated with mortality risk in middle-aged and older adults. People who could not hold 10 seconds had an 84% higher risk of death. That is the threshold. If you cannot hold a single leg stand for 30 seconds right now, balance training is not optional. It is urgent. Exercise snacks. You do not need an hour in the gym to improve your fitness. The concept of exercise snacks, brief bouts of vigorous movements scattered throughout the day, is backed by compelling research showing that even 60 to 90 seconds of intense effort, done a few times daily, produces meaningful cardiovascular and metabolic improvements. A study published in Nature Medicine found that just 3 to 4 daily bouts of vigorous intermittent lifestyle physical activity, lasting 1 to 2 minutes each, were associated with up to a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality. The beauty of exercise snacks is that they require zero equipment, zero preparation, and zero scheduling. Take the stairs 2 at a time at maximum effort. Drop and do 20 push-ups before lunch. Do 30 seconds of jumping jacks between meetings. Bang out a set of bodyweight squats while waiting for your coffee. Each bout is too short to need a warm-up, too brief to require recovery, and too scattered to feel like a workout. But the cumulative metabolic signal across the day is substantial. The physiology makes sense when you understand that your body responds to the frequency of movement signals, not just volume. Every burst triggers glucose uptake in your muscles, a brief heart rate elevation that maintains vascular elasticity, and a pulse of myokines, signaling molecules from contracting muscles that reduce inflammation and improve insulin sensitivity. Doing this 3 to 5 times daily keeps those signals firing throughout your waking hours. Exercise snacks are not a replacement for dedicated training. Think of them as a base layer that fills gaps between workouts. They are especially valuable for desk workers because they interrupt metabolic stagnation without requiring a change of clothes or a gym trip. Set 3 random alarms on your phone and do something intense for 60 seconds when they ring. That alone moves the needle more than most people expect. Deliberate cold exposure. Getting deliberately cold triggers a cascade of physiological responses that you cannot replicate with any supplement or pill. When cold water hits your skin, your sympathetic nervous system fires hard. Norepinephrine levels surge by 200 to 300%, a magnitude that rivals most pharmaceutical interventions. This neurotransmitter is responsible for focus, vigilance, and mood regulation, and the elevation persists for hours after the exposure ends. That is why cold showers and ice baths produce such a profound sense of alertness and well-being. The metabolic effects are equally significant. Cold exposure activates brown adipose tissue, a type of fat that generates heat by burning calories. Unlike white fat, which stores energy, brown fat is metabolically active and thermogenic. Regular cold exposure increases both the activity and volume of brown fat over time. A study in the Journal of Clinical Investigation confirmed that cold exposure significantly increased brown fat activity and improved whole body glucose metabolism. The protocol does not need to be extreme. Start with 30 seconds of cold water at the end of your shower and build tolerance gradually. Work up to 2 to 3 minutes over several weeks. If you have access to a cold plunge, water between 50 and 59 degrees Fahrenheit is the therapeutic range. 2 to 3 sessions per week of 2 to 5 minutes is sufficient. The discomfort is the point. You are triggering a controlled stress response that makes every system more resilient. Timing matters. Avoid cold exposure immediately after strength training, if hypertrophy is your goal, because the post-lifting inflammatory response is a necessary signal for muscle growth, and cold water blunts it. Use cold on rest days or after endurance work where inflammation reduction is desirable. The mood and focus benefits work regardless of timing. This is one of the most powerful free health interventions available if you can handle it. Heat exposure and sauna. Regular sauna use is associated with dramatic reductions in cardiovascular mortality, and the data is not subtle. A landmark Finnish study following over 2,000 men for 20 years found that those who used the sauna 4 to 7 times per week had a 40% lower risk of all-cause mortality compared to those who used it once a week. The dose-response relationship was clear. More frequent use equaled greater protection. This was not confounded by exercise habits or socioeconomic status. The mechanism centers on heat shock proteins. When your core temperature rises significantly, your cells produce these specialized proteins that repair misfolded proteins, protect cellular structures, and reduce oxidative damage. Think of heat shock proteins as an internal repair crew that only gets deployed under thermal stress. Regular activation of this system keeps your cellular machinery running cleaner and extends the functional lifespan of your tissues. This is a hormetic response, a small controlled stress that produces an outsized adaptive benefit. Sauna also provides a cardiovascular workout without physical movement. Your heart rate increases to 100 to 150 beats per minute during a sauna session, mimicking moderate exercise. Blood vessels dilate, improving endothelial function and reducing arterial stiffness. A study in the Journal of Human Hypertension found that regular sauna use significantly reduced blood pressure in hypertensive patients. You are essentially training your cardiovascular system while sitting still. The effective protocol is 170 to 212 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 to 20 minutes, 3 to 7 times per week. Hydrate with water and electrolytes before and after. If you lack a traditional sauna, An infrared sauna at lower temperatures still produces heat shock proteins at a slower rate. The critical variable is raising your core temperature enough to trigger sweating and discomfort. Like cold exposure, the discomfort is the active ingredient. Filter shower water. You filter your drinking water, but stand in unfiltered water for 10 to 15 minutes every day while it is hot enough to maximize chemical absorption through your skin. This is a blind spot in most people's health protocols. Municipal shower water contains chlorine and chloramine, which are disinfectants that do their job in the pipes but have no business being absorbed through your skin, inhaled as steam, or soaking into your hair and scalp for extended periods. When chlorinated water is heated, it produces volatile trihalomethanes and haloacetic acids. These are disinfection byproducts classified as potential carcinogens by the Environmental Protection Agency. In a hot shower, the steam you inhale carries these compounds directly into your lungs, where they enter your bloodstream with alarming efficiency. A study in environmental health perspectives found that dermal and inhalation exposure during showering contributed more to total trihalomethane body burden than actually drinking the water. Your shower is a bigger exposure route than your tap. The effects are visible on your body. Chlorine strips the natural oils from your skin and hair, disrupts the acid mantle that protects against pathogens, and kills beneficial bacteria on your skin surface. People who switch to filtered showers consistently report softer skin, less dandruff, reduced eczema flare-ups, and hair that stops feeling brittle and dry. These are not placebo effects. Removing a chemical irritant from daily contact with your largest organ produces obvious improvements. A quality shower filter costs between $30 and $50 and replaces every 6 months. Look for a unit that uses a combination of KDF media and activated carbon, which handles both chlorine and chloramine. Installation takes 5 minutes with no tools. This is one of the simplest and most cost-effective upgrades you can make to your daily health environment. You would not wash your face with pool water. Stop bathing in it. The digital sunset. 2 to 3 hours before bed, shut down every screen that is not absolutely essential. This is not about blue light glasses or night mode filters. Those help marginally, but the real problem is the cognitive stimulation that screens deliver. Social media, news feeds, email, and even engaging television activate your prefrontal cortex and trigger dopamine release at exactly the time your brain should be winding down. You cannot chemically prepare for sleep while simultaneously engaging in the most stimulating activity available to modern humans. The neurochemistry is straightforward. Screen engagement activates the sympathetic nervous system and suppresses the parasympathetic shift that needs to happen for sleep onset. Your brain interprets scrolling and clicking as activity that requires alertness. Meanwhile, the artificial light, even filtered, signals to your suprachiasmatic nucleus that it is still daytime. The combination of cognitive arousal and photic stimulation creates a double barrier to the natural sleep cascade that should begin hours before you actually close your eyes. Replace screen time with analog activities that allow your nervous system to downshift. Read a physical book, have a conversation, journal with pen and paper, stretch or do gentle yoga, listen to music or a podcast with the screen face down. These activities engage your mind without the dopaminergic overstimulation that screens provide. The goal is to let your parasympathetic nervous system take over gradually, rather than slamming from full stimulation to eyes closed. People who implement a hard digital sunset consistently report the most dramatic sleep improvements of any single intervention. Faster sleep onset, deeper slow wave sleep, and more vivid dreaming, which indicates healthy REM architecture. If you cannot commit to 2 hours, start with 1. Put your phone in another room. Turn off the television. Give your brain the signal that the day is ending. This single habit change often outperforms every sleep supplement combined. Eliminate alcohol for HRV. Alcohol is the most widely consumed sleep disruptor and metabolic poison that society has collectively decided to pretend is harmless. Even moderate drinking, 1 to 2 drinks, measurably suppresses REM sleep, increases resting heart rate, and tanks your heart rate variability for 24 to 48 hours after consumption. HRV is a direct measure of your autonomic nervous system health, and there is no amount of alcohol that does not suppress it. The mechanism is multi-layered. Alcohol is metabolized into acetaldehyde, a toxic compound that your liver must prioritize clearing. This process diverts metabolic resources away from normal overnight repair functions. Your sympathetic nervous system stays elevated as your body processes the poison, preventing the parasympathetic dominance required for restorative sleep. Even if you fall asleep faster after drinking, the quality of that sleep is dramatically worse. Your deep sleep and REM cycles are fragmented and shortened. Track it yourself and the data becomes undeniable. Wear a wearable that measures HRV and compare nights with and without alcohol. The difference will typically be 30 to 50% lower HRV after even a single drink. Your resting heart rate will be 5 to 15 beats higher. Your sleep score will drop noticeably. This is not an opinion or a moral judgment. It is physiology that anyone with a fitness tracker can verify in a single weekend experiment. The argument that red wine is healthy because of resveratrol has been debunked. The amount of resveratrol in wine is pharmacologically irrelevant. You would need hundreds of bottles for a therapeutic dose. Any cardiovascular benefit in older studies has been explained by healthier lifestyle confounders in the drinking population. If you want to optimize recovery, sleep, cognitive function, and body composition, alcohol is the most impactful thing to remove. The improvement is visible in your data within 48 hours. Wear a continuous glucose monitor. A continuous glucose monitor gives you real-time visibility into how your body responds to specific foods, exercise, sleep, and stress. Instead of guessing which foods spike your blood sugar, you see the data on your arm in 5-minute intervals throughout the day. This transforms nutrition from abstract guidelines into personalized feedback. 2 people can eat the identical meal and have wildly different glucose responses based on their gut microbiome, insulin sensitivity, and metabolic health. The practical insights are immediate. You will discover that certain foods you thought were healthy cause massive glucose spikes, while other foods you avoided are perfectly fine. White rice might spike you, but not your friend. A banana might be fine after a workout, but terrible on an empty stomach. Stress and poor sleep elevate your fasting glucose, even when your diet is perfect. None of this is visible without continuous measurement. You are flying blind without one. Wearing a monitor for even 2 to 4 weeks gives you enough data to fundamentally change how you eat. You learn which food combinations blunt spikes, how exercise timing affects glucose clearance, and which meals keep you stable versus which ones send you on a roller coaster. This data persists in your knowledge base long after you remove the sensor. Most people who do a single trial permanently change 3 to 5 dietary habits based on what they learn. The sensors are available over the counter and cost about $75 to $100 per 2-week sensor. Apply it to the back of your upper arm and scan with your phone. The cost is worth it for the education alone. Think of it as understanding your personal metabolic fingerprint. Generic nutrition advice tells you what works on average. A glucose monitor tells you what works for you. That distinction is the difference between guessing and knowing. Advanced biannual blood panels. The standard annual physical gives you a blood panel designed to detect problems that already exist. By the time your fasting glucose is flagged as high, insulin resistance has been developing for years. By the time your thyroid-stimulating hormone is out of range, thyroid dysfunction has been progressing silently. The standard panel is a rear-view mirror. An advanced biannual panel is a windshield that shows you what is coming before it arrives. Twice a year, order a comprehensive panel that includes markers most doctors do not routinely check. Fasting insulin is the earliest indicator of metabolic dysfunction, often elevated a decade before glucose rises. Hemoglobin A1C gives you a 3-month average of blood sugar rather than a single snapshot. High-sensitivity C-reactive protein reveals systemic inflammation that drives cardiovascular disease and accelerates aging. A complete thyroid panel, including free T3, free T4, and thyroid antibodies, catches autoimmune thyroid conditions that TSH alone misses. Add a comprehensive metabolic panel, a complete blood count with differential, a lipid panel that includes particle size and number rather than just total cholesterol, and markers like homocysteine, ferritin, and vitamin D. If you are over 40, add a polypoprotein B, which is a better predictor of cardiovascular risk than LDL cholesterol. Each of these markers tells a specific story about a different system in your body, and together they paint a picture that no single test can provide. The key is tracking markers over time. A single blood draw is a snapshot. 2 panels per year for 5 years gives you a trend line that reveals your health trajectory with remarkable precision. You can catch problems 5 to 10 years before they become clinical diagnoses. Direct-to-consumer lab companies make this accessible without a doctor's order. Take ownership of your data. The only barrier is whether you choose to look. Red light therapy. Red and near-infrared light at specific wavelengths penetrates your skin and is absorbed by chromophores in your mitochondria, specifically cytochrome C oxidase, the 4th complex in the electron transport chain. When this enzyme absorbs photons at 630 to 670 nanometers and 810 to 850 nanometers, it increases the rate of adenosine triphosphate production in those cells. More cellular energy means faster tissue repair, reduced inflammation, and enhanced cellular function across whatever tissue you expose. The research has expanded rapidly in the last decade. Studies have demonstrated benefits for wound healing, joint pain reduction, muscle recovery acceleration, skin collagen production, hair regrowth in androgenetic alopecia, and even cognitive enhancement when applied to the skull. A meta-analysis in the Journal of Photochemistry and Photobiology found significant reductions in delayed-onset muscle soreness and inflammation markers when red light therapy was applied after exercise. The mechanism goes beyond simple energy production. Red light exposure also modulates reactive oxygen species levels in cells, which serves as a signaling mechanism that triggers downstream anti-inflammatory and antioxidant gene expression. It reduces the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines and increases the expression of anti-inflammatory mediators. This is why the same therapy that speeds wound healing also reduces chronic joint pain. It is acting on the cellular signaling layer, not just the energy layer. For practical use, you need a device that delivers adequate irradiance, at least 20 to 50 milliwatts per square centimeter at the treatment distance. Panel-style devices work best for body coverage. Use them at 6 to 12 inches from the skin for 10 to 20 minutes per session, 3 to 5 times per week. Target specific areas of concern or do full body sessions. Avoid cheap devices with insufficient power output. The dose matters, and underpowered devices do not deliver enough photons to produce a meaningful biological effect. Replace midday naps with NSDR. Traditional naps are a gamble. If you sleep too long or too deeply, you wake up groggy with sleep inertia that takes 30 minutes to clear. If you nap too late in the day, you delay sleep onset at night. Non-sleep deep rest protocols solve both problems by delivering many of the restorative benefits of sleep without actually crossing into sleep stages that disrupt your nocturnal rhythm. NSDR is a deliberate relaxation practice that shifts your nervous system into a parasympathetic state. The practice involves lying down, closing your eyes, and following a guided protocol that typically combines body scanning, slow breathing, and progressive attention shifting. Yoga Nidra is the traditional form. The key distinction from meditation is that NSDR is designed to bring you to the edge of sleep without crossing over. Brain imaging shows that NSDR produces increases in theta wave activity similar to stage 1 sleep, along with significant reductions in cortisol and increases in dopamine availability. A study from Scandinavia found that a single 30-minute Yoga Nidra session increased dopamine release by 65% in the striatum. That is a massive boost in the neurotransmitter most associated with motivation and learning. Unlike caffeine, which blocks the signal telling you are tired, NSDR actually replenishes neurochemical resources. You wake from a session feeling genuinely refreshed rather than artificially stimulated. The cognitive and mood benefits last for hours. The protocol is simple. Set aside 10 to 30 minutes in the early afternoon. Lie down somewhere quiet. Use a guided NSDR recording. Many are free online. Do not pressure yourself to fall asleep. Just follow the instructions. If you drift off, that is fine, but it is not the goal. After the session, you will have better focus, steadier mood, and improved learning capacity for the rest of the day. This replaces the nap without the downsides. The nightly brain dump. Racing thoughts at bedtime are not a personality flaw. They are a work-in-memory overflow problem. Your prefrontal cortex has been accumulating unresolved tasks, incomplete plans, and open loops all day. When you finally lie down and remove all external stimulation, those unfinished items flood your conscious awareness because your brain interprets them as active threats to your survival. It does not distinguish between a pending work email and a genuine emergency. Open loops are open loops. The Zeigarnik effect explains this. Incomplete tasks occupy more mental bandwidth than completed ones because your brain keeps them in an active processing queue. A study published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology found that writing a specific plan for unfinished tasks reduced intrusive thoughts about those tasks significantly. The act of writing them down signals to your brain that the items have been captured and a plan exists, allowing it to release them from active processing and shift into sleep preparation mode. Every night before bed, spend 5 minutes writing down every unfinished task, worry, or thought occupying space in your head. Do not organize or prioritize. Just dump it onto paper. Then write 1 to 3 specific next actions for tomorrow. This 2-step process of capture and planning closes the open loops. Your brain needs to know the information has been externalized and that a future self will handle it. Keep a dedicated notebook on your nightstand. Do not use your phone because the screen light and temptation to start addressing items will undo the benefit. Handwriting engages different cognitive processes than typing, creating a stronger sense of externalization. People who adopt this habit report falling asleep 10 to 15 minutes faster. It is the cognitive equivalent of putting your tools away at the end of a workday. You cannot rest in a cluttered workspace. Dopamine fasting. Your brain has a finite capacity for pleasure and motivation, and modern life is draining it at an unprecedented rate. Every notification, every social media scroll, every bite of engineered food, and every on-demand entertainment option triggers small releases of dopamine that, when repeated constantly, down-regulate your dopamine receptors. The result is that normal pleasures, a good conversation, a sunset, the satisfaction of completing a task, stop registering. You need bigger and bigger hits to feel anything at all. This is not about dopamine being bad. It is about the baseline. When your receptors are constantly stimulated, they reduce their sensitivity to protect themselves. This is called homeostatic downregulation, and it is the same mechanism that drives drug tolerance. You are not addicted to your phone in the clinical sense, but the neurochemical pattern is identical. More stimulation leads to less sensitivity, which leads to craving more stimulation. The cycle accelerates until your baseline state feels flat and unmotivated. A dopamine fast is a deliberate period of reduced stimulation designed to allow receptor sensitivity to recover. 1 day per week, eliminate or dramatically reduce the most stimulating inputs. No social media, no video content, no junk food, no shopping, no video games. Replace them with walking, reading, cooking from scratch, conversation, journaling, or just being bored. Boredom is the active ingredient because it is the state where your brain recalibrates its reward threshold. You do not need to go full monk mode forever. 1 day per week of low stimulation is enough to maintain healthy receptor sensitivity. After a fast day, simple pleasures feel more rewarding. Food tastes better. Conversations feel more engaging. Work feels more motivating. This is not placebo. This is receptor upregulation in real time. The people most resistant to trying this are usually the ones who need it most. If a day without your phone triggers anxiety, that is your answer. Bilateral stimulation. Bilateral stimulation is a technique borrowed from EMDR therapy that involves alternating sensory input to the left and right sides of your body. This can be rhythmic eye movements, alternating taps on your knees, or even walking while paying attention to the alternating foot strikes. The technique was originally developed for trauma processing, but the underlying mechanism has broader applications for stress reduction, emotional regulation, and cognitive processing that anyone can use. The neuroscience suggests that bilateral stimulation activates both hemispheres of your brain in an alternating pattern, which enhances interhemispheric communication and engages the default mode network differently than normal waking consciousness. Research published in the Journal of EMDR Practice and research found that bilateral stimulation reduces emotional intensity of distressing memories, lowers cortisol levels, and increases parasympathetic nervous system activity. You are essentially mimicking the eye movement patterns of REM sleep while awake. The practical application is dead simple. When you feel stressed, anxious, or emotionally activated, do the butterfly tap. Cross your arms over your chest and alternately tap your left and right shoulders at a slow, steady rhythm for 2 to 3 minutes. Alternatively, go for a walk and pay deliberate attention to the alternating pattern of your feet hitting the ground. Both methods engage the bilateral mechanism and produce a measurable shift in autonomic nervous system state within minutes. You can also use this proactively. Before a difficult conversation, after receiving stressful news, or at the end of a demanding workday, 2 minutes of bilateral stimulation can reset your emotional baseline. It works because the alternating activation pattern interrupts the fixed attentional focus that characterizes anxiety and rumination. Your brain shifts from a narrow threat-focused mode to a broader processing state. This is a free, portable, evidence-based tool for emotional regulation that requires nothing except your own 2 hands. Nature exposure and phytoncides. Spending time in natural environments produces physiological changes that no indoor activity can replicate. The Japanese practice of forest bathing has been studied extensively, and the data shows that even 2 hours per week in a forest environment significantly reduces cortisol, lowers blood pressure, decreases sympathetic nervous system activity, and increases natural killer cell count. That last one matters because natural killer cells are your immune system's frontline defense against virally infected cells and early-stage cancer. The mechanism behind the immune boost is phytoncides, volatile organic compounds released by trees as part of their defense system. When you inhale these compounds, your body responds by increasing the number and activity of natural killer cells. A study from Nippon Medical School found that natural killer cell activity remained elevated for more than 7 days after a forest weekend. No supplement, no drug, and no workout produces a comparable sustained immune response from a single exposure. The mental health effects are equally robust. Attention restoration theory explains that natural environments engage involuntary attention, the soft fascination of rustling leaves and flowing water, which allows your directed attention circuits to recover from the constant demand of modern life. Studies from the University of Michigan show that even 20 minutes in a park reduces cortisol more effectively than 20 minutes of urban walking. The stress reduction is not about exercise, it is about the sensory environment. Make nature exposure a weekly non-negotiable. A forest, a park with mature trees, a trail, or a dense garden will work. Leave your phone on silent. Breathe deeply through your nose to maximize phytoncide inhalation. Do not treat it as exercise. Treat it as a biological reset. 2 hours per week split across 2 sessions is the dose most associated with health benefits in the literature. Your immune system, stress hormones, and prefrontal cortex will all function better for it. Dry brushing. Before you step into the shower each morning, spend 3 to 5 minutes brushing your entire body with a natural bristle brush, using long, firm strokes toward your heart. This is dry brushing, and it does something no other hygiene habit accomplishes. It manually stimulates your lymphatic system, the network of vessels and nodes responsible for transporting immune cells, filtering metabolic waste, and draining interstitial fluid from your tissues. Unlike your cardiovascular system, your lymphatic system has no pump. It relies entirely on muscle contraction and external pressure to move fluid. When lymph stagnates, waste products accumulate in your tissues, contributing to puffiness, fatigue, and sluggish immune responses. Dry brushing creates a wave of mechanical pressure that pushes lymph toward your major lymph nodes for processing. Start at your feet and brush upward along your legs. Then start at your hands and brush up your arms. Brush your torso toward the center of your chest, where the lymphatic ducts converge. Always move toward the heart because that is the direction of lymphatic flow. The secondary benefit is exfoliation. Dry brushing removes dead skin cells far more effectively than a loofah or body scrub because it works on dry skin where the dead cells are not softened by water. This unclogs pores, allows your skin to breathe more efficiently, and improves the absorption of anything you apply afterward, like moisturizer or mineral sunscreen. People who dry brush consistently notice smoother skin texture within a week. Some proponents claim dry brushing reduces cellulite. The evidence for permanent reduction is weak, but it temporarily improves the appearance of dimpled skin by increasing blood flow and reducing fluid retention. Regardless of that debate, the lymphatic stimulation alone makes this worth doing. A quality bristle brush costs $10 to $15 and lasts years. 3 minutes before your shower is a small investment for a cleaner, better functioning lymphatic system. Chew hard foods for jaw hypertrophy. The modern human jaw is significantly smaller than our ancestors because we eat soft processed foods that require almost no masticatory effort. Orthodontists are correcting crowded teeth in a majority of children now, and the root cause is underdeveloped jaw bones, not genetics. Your jaw is a bone, and like all bones, it responds to mechanical loading by growing denser and stronger. When you chew hard fibrous foods regularly, you apply forces that stimulate osteoblast activity and remodel the mandible and maxilla. This is not just cosmetic. A well-developed jaw creates more airway space behind the tongue, which directly reduces the risk of obstructive sleep apnea and improves breathing mechanics. Research has shown that populations eating traditional diets with tough foods have wider dental arches, straighter teeth, and larger airways compared to populations eating modern soft diets. The anthropologist Daniel Lieberman has documented this extensively, showing that jaw development is primarily an environmental response to chewing forces, not predetermined by genes. The practical approach is to deliberately incorporate hard, chewy foods into your daily diet. Raw carrots, raw celery, tough cuts of meat with connective tissue, dried fruits, nuts in the shell, and hard, crusty bread all require significant masticatory force. For targeted jaw training, mastic gum from the mastic tree is the gold standard. It is significantly harder than regular chewing gum and provides the type of sustained resistance that drives structural adaptation. Chew mastic gum for 15 to 30 minutes daily, alternating sides. If you experience temporomandibular joint pain, start with shorter sessions and build gradually. The jaw muscles need time to adapt, like any other muscle being trained. Over months of consistent hard chewing, you will notice a more defined jawline, stronger bite force, and potentially improved nasal breathing from better maxillary development. Your face is meant to look different than what a soft food diet shaped it into. Swap to mineral sunscreen. Most sunscreens on the market are chemical formulas containing active ingredients like oxybenzone, avobenzone, octinoxate, and homosalate. These compounds absorb ultraviolet radiation by converting it to heat in your skin. The problem is that they also absorb into your bloodstream at levels that exceed the threshold the Food and Drug Administration sets for chemicals that can be presumed safe without further testing. A clinical trial, published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, found detectable levels of these chemicals in blood after a single day of use, persisting for weeks. Oxybenzone is the most concerning. It is a known endocrine disruptor that mimics estrogen, interferes with thyroid function, and has been detected in breast milk, amniotic fluid, and urine of virtually every person tested. It also devastates coral reef ecosystems, which is why Hawaii and several countries have banned it from sunscreens sold in their regions. You are applying this to your largest organ every day, and it is entering systemic circulation within hours. Mineral sunscreens use zinc oxide or titanium dioxide as their active ingredients. These minerals sit on top of your skin and physically reflect and scatter ultraviolet rays rather than absorbing them. They do not penetrate into your bloodstream. They provide broad-spectrum protection immediately upon application, rather than requiring 20 minutes to activate like chemical filters.